Welcome to a new episode of The Secret of Fear. I'm your host, and tonight we plunge into one of the most deeply disturbing family legacies ever chronicled. The story of the Addingtons is not intended for those of a delicate disposition. What started as a narrative of ambition and prosperity would rapidly descend into something far more sinister, a darkness destined to haunt the corridors of Addington Manor for generations yet to come. But this is more than just a ghost story. What we've uncovered suggests the horrors of Addington Manor were never meant to stay within its walls. They were designed to spread. Before we commence, a word of caution is necessary. The testimony you are about to encounter has been pieced together from fragments of historical records, personal journals, and classified government documents never intended for public scrutiny. Some of what I will disclose tonight has been deliberately suppressed by authorities convinced the public was unprepared for such revelations. Others would dismiss it all as mere superstition or the incoherent ramblings of disturbed minds. But as you shall soon learn, the pattern that emerges across the centuries is far too consistent, far too precise, to be dismissed as simple coincidence or collective delusion. For our more sensitive viewers, now might be the time to reconsider your decision to continue. The horrors of Addington Manor are not merely physical in nature, they are existential. They confront our fundamental understanding of reality. They imply that beneath the fragile veneer of our ordered world lies something vast and incomprehensible, something that has utilized generations of a single family as its conduit into our reality. You have been warned. It was the year 1842 when Edward Addington, a businessman of unrelenting ambition and shrewd disposition, purchased a sprawling estate in the misty highlands of northern England. The manor, previously owned by the disgraced Blackwood family, was acquired for a suspiciously low price. Local rumors insisted the property was cursed, but Edward dismissed such talk as provincial superstition. Where others perceived only darkness, he saw pure opportunity, the first in a long series of grave miscalculations that would come to define the Addington legacy. The region itself was deeply steeped in ancient history, with Neolithic stone circles scattered across the surrounding moors and prehistoric burial mounds resting in the estate's shadow. Archaeologists had long theorized that the area functioned as a significant ritual site for pre-Celtic cultures, speculating they selected this location due to some quality we might now characterize as electromagnetic or geomagnetic anomalies. What ancient peoples interpreted as a divine presence, modern science might ascribe to unusual natural phenomena. Yet as our story progresses, you may find yourself questioning whether such distinctions remain as clear as we might prefer to believe. Edward had constructed his fortune upon the industries of coal and steel, enterprises built upon the broken backs of laborers. As the Industrial Revolution transformed England, Edward positioned himself at its bleeding edge, quite literally, given that the mortality rates in his factories ranked among the highest in the nation. His mines delved deeper than any of his competitors, extracting coal from depths others deemed too perilous or unprofitable to explore. Some of his miners spoke of peculiar fossils uncovered in these deepest tunnels, remnants of creatures that defied all classification, but such curiosities had a habit of vanishing once reported to management. Edward's reputation for ruthlessness preceded him, yet few understood the true scope of his cruelty. Those who crossed him developed an uncanny tendency to disappear, their fates sealed behind closed doors with whispers and handshakes. The bodies of labor organizers would occasionally wash up on the shores of the Thames, their tongues removed, a detail the newspapers tactfully chose to omit. Edward was a man who operated on the belief that power was not inherited, but seized by any means necessary. His fascination with power stretched beyond the material world. Despite his public contempt for superstition, Edward maintained a private library filled with occult texts and employed a succession of tutors to instruct him in ancient languages, Hebrew, Sanskrit, and others far more obscure. Visitors to his London residence reported catching glimpses of strange evening gatherings, attended by some of the most powerful figures in British society and politics. What transpired during these meetings was never openly discussed, but servants whispered of chanting, peculiar odors, and guests who departed looking strangely diminished, as though something vital had been extracted from them. After moving into the manor with his young wife, Eleanor, and their 5 children, Edward commissioned extensive renovations. The workers were imported from distant locales, none were local, as residents from nearby villages refused to set foot upon the property. Most were immigrants desperate for employment and unable to comprehend the warnings murmured in local taverns. Those who did understand English found their concerns dismissed or met with deportation threats. The renovation crew was housed in temporary quarters on the grounds, and from the very start, they recounted strange happenings. Many grumbled about odd noises within the walls, not the typical settling of an aged house, but rhythmic tappings that seemed to follow distinct patterns, almost like a code. Workers described sudden, brutal drops in temperature, even on warm summer days, cold spots so intense their breath would fog and frost would coat their tools. Most disturbing was the pervasive, unsettling sensation of being watched, particularly within the East Wing, where the men adamantly refused to work alone. To keep the laborious in line, Edward hired a foreman notorious for his heavy-handed management. Complaints were met with docked pay or immediate dismissal. Despite these measures, the project fell persistently behind schedule as workers fled under cover of darkness, abandoning their possessions rather than spend another hour within Addington Manor. 3 workers perished under mysterious circumstances during the renovation. The first, a stonemason named Gregory, fell from a scaffold while working on the East Wing's facade. Witnesses stated that moments before his fall, Gregory had been staring intently at something inside the room, his expression frozen in pure terror. The second, a carpenter called Thomas, drowned in the estate's lake despite his reputation as a powerful swimmer who had once saved a child from the Thames. His body was discovered floating face down in the lake center, showing no signs of struggle or injury, save for his eyes, which had turned completely white, as if bleached. The third death was perhaps the most unsettling. A young apprentice named William was discovered hanging in the cellar with no conceivable way to have reached such a position. The beam from which he hung stood nearly 15 feet high, with no nearby furniture that could have served as a platform. Even more baffling, the rope around his neck displayed no evidence of a knot. It appeared instead as a continuous loop, as if woven directly around his flesh. The local authorities, significantly influenced by Edward's generous contributions to the county magistrate and police commissioner, ruled all 3 deaths as tragic accidents. The magistrate, Sir Reginald Thorpe, was a regular attendee at Edward's London gatherings and shared his interest in the occult. Investigations conducted much later would reveal that Thorpe's family maintained ancestral ties to the Blackwoods, a fact he took considerable effort to conceal. Construction pressed on despite the fatalities, with new workers continually brought in to replace those who had died or fled. Edward offered substantial completion bonuses, repeatedly doubling and then tripling the sum as difficulties escalated. Within 6 months, at a cost both exorbitant and human, Addington Manor was reborn as a monument to Victorian opulence. The final structure stood as a tribute to excess and questionable taste. The exterior presented a harmonious Gothic revival facade, all pointed arches and elaborate stonework rising commandingly above meticulously landscaped grounds. But the interior was a bewildering fusion of styles and influences that mirrored Edward's eclectic fixations. Crystal chandeliers depended from Corford ceilings adorned with astronomical charts of suspicious accuracy, depicting celestial bodies unknown to the astronomy of that era. Persian carpets lay across polished hardwood floors featuring inlaid patterns that seemed to shift when observed from different vantage points. Priceless paintings covered walls of deep crimson and midnight blue, many portraying scenes from obscure mythological traditions, sacrificial rites and entities that were neither fully human nor entirely bestial. Most striking of all was the library, occupying the manor's entire west wing. Reaching 3 stories high with spiral staircases connecting its levels, it contained one of England's most exceptional private collections of rare books. Beyond the anticipated classics and contemporary works, Edward's collection included ancient tomes bound in materials that resisted easy identification. Scholars later granted access to the library described texts written in languages with no known speakers, inscribed on substances resembling neither parchment nor paper. These volumes were kept in a dedicated section secured behind locked glass doors, visible yet inaccessible to casual visitors. Yet for all its grandeur, an undeniably oppressive atmosphere permeated Addington Manor. Guests invited to the elaborate housewarming celebration in December 1842 seldom remained the night, despite the hazardous winter journey that awaited them. Those who did stay reported fitful sleep and unsettling dreams. Lady Harrington, a close friend of Eleanor's, confided in her diary, "There is something profoundly unwholesome about the air in that house. It feels dense in one's lungs, as if carrying some invisible contamination." I awoke repeatedly with the distinct sensation of being watched, and on one occasion I could swear I witnessed the doorknob turning slowly, even though the door remained securely locked. I shall decline any future invitation to Addington Manor. Let friendship be damned. Eleanor Addington, once celebrated for her vibrancy and sociability, grew increasingly reclusive as winter gave way to a particularly bitter spring. Where she had formerly been renowned for her lively conversation and sharp wit, she now spoke sparingly at social functions, her gaze troubled and distant. She dismissed her lady's maid of many years, accusing the woman of spying on her, and began refusing meals prepared by the kitchen staff, surviving largely on tea and dry toast that she prepared herself. She spoke of hearing children's laughter echoing through empty hallways and glimpsing figures darting past doorways from the corner of her eye. Most alarming to the staff was her new tendency to halt mid-sentence, tilting her head as if listening to a voice only she could perceive, then responding in hushed tones to the empty air. Edward dismissed her anxieties, attributing them to female hysteria, a convenient diagnosis for any Victorian woman daring to express unease. "The house is merely settling," he would declare with thinly veiled annoyance. Nothing more. But Eleanor knew better. A genuine malevolence inhabited Addington Manor, something that appeared to nourish itself on fear and despair. She commenced keeping a journal to document the strange occurrences her husband so readily dismissed. Her handwriting, once elegant and controlled, grew progressively erratic as the entries accumulated, the pressure of her pen occasionally tearing through the paper. Her notations became increasingly disturbed as the weeks bled into months. April 18, 1843. I discovered William, our youngest, conversing with the wall in the east wing once more. When I inquired who addressed him, he replied, "The sad lady who dwells within." Edward insists it is nothing but childish fancy. Yet William described her with such minute detail, the lace collar of her dress, the pearl buttons descending her back, the dark stain blooming across her abdomen. No child could fabricate such specifics. When I pressed him further, William revealed the lady told him she had resided in the house long ago and that the master heard her because of the baby. I asked if she meant Edward, and William appeared confused. "No, mother, she said it was before the fire. No fire has touched Addington Manor within living memory. April 30, 1843. Margaret's governess tendered her notice today. She alleges Margaret threatened her with a knife taken from the breakfast table, stating, "They instructed me to open you up and see what lies inside." When confronted, Margaret possessed no memory of the event and wept without consolation. The poor child has not been herself since our arrival here. Her night terrors have intensified, and she has begun collecting dead insects, arranging them in intricate patterns upon her window sill. Dr. Wallace prescribed a tonic to aid her sleep, but it only renders the nightmares more vivid. This morning, she informed me she does not wish to be hollowed out like the others. When I asked her meaning, she stared at me as though I were a complete stranger. May 3, 1843. The temperature in the master bedroom plummeted so drastically last night that my breath became visible. Edward slept soundly while I remained awake, observing a dark figure standing motionless at our bed's foot for hours. I was utterly paralyzed, incapable of screaming or rousing him. The figure seemed composed of a shadow deeper than the surrounding darkness, bearing only the suggestion of a face, two hollows where eyes should reside, and a darker gash that might have been a mouth. It produced no sound, made no movement, it simply watched. When dawn's first light pierced the curtains, it dissipated like smoke. Edward discovered me weeping and proposed I visit Dr. Harrison for a tonic to soothe my nerves. I fear he believes I am descending into madness. Perhaps I am. May 17, 1843. I ventured into the east wing today, lured by the sound of a woman's weeping. I found nothing, yet the crying appeared to pursue me, always just around the subsequent corner or behind the next door. Eventually, I arrived at the chamber at the corridor's end, the one Edward has claimed as his private study. The door was locked, yet I am certain the sounds originated from within. When I pressed my ear to the wood, The weeping ceased abruptly, supplanted by a whisper so immediate it might have been inside my own skull. "He will hollow you out, too." I fled, but upon reaching the main staircase, I glanced back to find Edward standing outside his study, observing me with an expression I have never before witnessed. Not anger, but a cold, calculating assessment, as if I were a specimen beneath glass. June 17, 1843. 3 additional servants have given notice this week. That brings the total to 11 who have departed since our arrival. They whisper of rooms that lock themselves, objects that relocate untouched, and voices crying out from vacant chambers. The undergardener vows he witnessed a procession of white-clad figures traversing the lawn at midnight, proceeding toward the ancient stone circle on the property's northern edge. The new nursemaid refuses to enter the children's rooms after nightfall, claiming she observes something standing over them as they sleep. Edward has prohibited all discussion of these events, threatening immediate dismissal without reference for anyone disseminating hysterical nonsense. He grows more remote with each passing day, devoting hours to his locked study or the East Wing library. When he does emerge, a feverish gleam lights his eyes and a tremor afflicts his hands that he cannot fully suppress. July 2, 1843. The twins have invented a strange game they name the Hollow People. They take turns standing perfectly motionless while the other drapes them in sheets and pretends to withdraw something invisible from their chests. When I asked Alexander what they were extracting, he answered matter-of-factly, "The light inside, mother. That is what they desire from us." Victoria nodded gravely and added, "The hungry ones behind the walls require it to make themselves real. I have forbidden the game, yet I overhear them playing when they believe me absent. Last evening, I watched them through a crack in their bedroom door. They had abandoned the sheets, instead standing in the moonlight, executing precise cutting motions in the air before their bodies. Most disturbing was their perfect synchronicity. They moved as if directed by a single consciousness. As Eleanor's psychological state decayed, Edward became progressively more absent, investing long hours in his study or away on business. His complexion adopted a grayish pallor, and he shed weight rapidly, his once sturdy frame turning almost skeletal. Yet a feverish energy clung to him, a manic intensity that manifested in frenetic bursts of activity followed by spans of near catatonia. Household staff reported discovering him standing motionless in odd corners of the house, staring fixedly at blank walls or empty space, muttering equations and phrases in unrecognizable languages. The children were largely entrusted to nannies and tutors, most of whom seldom endured more than a few weeks before escaping the manor's oppressive ambience. Young William developed a stutter and resumed bedwetting. Margaret was apprehended on multiple occasions attempting to injure smaller village children who strayed too near the estate's boundaries. The twins, Alexander and Victoria, seemed to converse in a private language, falling silent the instant adults entered the room. Only Charles, the eldest at 16, seemed relatively unscathed, though servants noted he had taken to constantly carrying a silver letter opener and barricading his bedroom door each night. By autumn, circumstances had worsened considerably. Eleanor's journal entries grew increasingly fragmented and illegible. She wrote of geometries that injure the eyes and voices that speak from behind time. She sketched diagrams devoid of mathematical logic, yet which generated a disturbing sense of depth when stared at for prolonged periods. Several pages contained nothing but the same phrase, replicated hundreds of times, "They are hollowing us out one by one." Asterisk. Asterisk asterisk, and this is where the story takes its most chilling turn. What Eleanor discovered next wasn't just a family secret, it was a design, a blueprint for a horror that was always intended to escape its confines. Asterisk asterisk. The pivotal moment arrived on a tempestuous night in November 1843. Eleanor, unable to sleep, wandered the East Wing's corridors, a section of the house Edward had inexplicably declared forbidden to all, including his own family. The final coherent entry in her journal, dated November 13, records her decision to violate this prohibition. I can endure this no longer. The sounds emanating from behind the walls have become intolerable. Not merely weeping now, but screams that slash through my dreams and leave me bleeding into consciousness. Edward has forbidden any of us from accessing the East Wing's third floor. Yet he himself spends countless hours there, returning with a look of dreadful exultation that freezes my blood. Tonight, during his absence in London, I shall uncover the secret he guards so possessively. May God pardon my trespass and shield me from whatever I might find. Her discovery there would forever alter the Addington family's trajectory. According to fragmented accounts later assembled from servants' testimonies and Charles's concealed journal, Eleanor utilized a stolen key to access the locked staircase ascending to the East Wing's third floor. The area had been utterly transformed from its original design. The multiple chambers indicated on the architect's plans had been reconfigured into a single, vast room with a disorienting layout, corners appearing sharper or blunter than 90 degrees, a ceiling that seemed to retreat infinitely upward in some spots while pressing down claustrophobically in others. But it was the floor that captured Eleanor's horrified attention. The costly Persian carpets found elsewhere in the manor were absent here. Instead, the entire surface was covered by an intricate mosaic fashioned from thousands of minute tiles of diverse materials, some stone, some metal, some substances she could not identify. Collectively, they formed a massive geometric design that appeared to shift and throb in the flickering candlelight. At the pattern's heart lay a circular depression roughly 6 feet across. Concealed behind a false wall hidden by a tapestry, Eleanor located a secret chamber. The room was compact and windowless, its stone walls engraved with bizarre symbols. A pedestal stood at its center, supporting a leather-bound book. Eleanor would later describe it in her journal as ancient beyond comprehension, its cover crafted from a substance I dare not ponder too deeply. Its pages contained scripts in multiple languages, some identifiable as Latin and Greek, others completely alien to Eleanor's educated eye. Interspersed throughout the text were alarming illustrations portraying ritual sacrifice and communion with entities that seemed neither human nor animal, but some dreadful hybrid of both. A meticulous review of these images exposed a horrifying pattern. Each one depicted a circular chamber with a distinctive floor design identical to the one in the room Eleanor had just quit. Most disturbing were the illustrations showing human figures positioned strategically around the central depression, their chests splayed open to reveal not internal organs, but vast, starry voids, as though each human body enclosed an entire cosmos being somehow harvested or channeled. The book's final pages listed names and dates spanning centuries, with Edward Addington's name and the date December 21, 1843, the winter solstice, freshly inscribed. Eleanor had unearthed Edward's most terrible secret. His fortune was not founded on business savvy alone, but on forbidden knowledge and dreadful pacts with forces existing beyond human comprehension. The manor's renovations had not been purely aesthetic. They had transmuted the property into an enormous sigil, a beacon to draw entities from behind the veil of our reality. And the deaths during construction were not accidents, but intentional sacrifices, their life energy harnessed to power the terrible mechanism Edward was engineering. When Edward found Eleanor within the hidden chamber, his fury was terrifying. By the spring of 1844, the remaining staff reported Edward had begun sleepwalking, frequently discovered standing inert in the children's rooms deep in the night, observing their slumber with an unnatural stillness. The children themselves started demonstrating troubling behaviors. 10-year-old William was caught mutilating small garden creatures. 12-year-old Margaret began articulating herself in languages she had never learned. The twins, Alexander and Victoria, cultivated a fixation with death, devising elaborate funeral ceremonies for their dolls and pets. Only Charles seemed to retain his sanity, though his journal entries reveal a mounting dread that the force possessing his family would eventually claim him. He initiated escape plans, secretly corresponding with his mother's brother in London. I dread what father is becoming, Charles penned in April 1844. Yesterday, I observed him in the garden at dawn, interring something swathed in bloody sheets. When he returned indoors, soil clung beneath his fingernails and a serenity marked his expression that chilled me to my core. I have not laid eyes on Margaret since the prior afternoon. Charles never achieved his escape. On May 17, 1844, a fire erupted in Addington Manor's East Wing. By the time the local fire brigade arrived, the conflagration had devoured most of the house. They discovered Edward Addington in the garden, serenely observing the inferno with what witnesses described as a countenance of rapturous fulfillment. Within the manor's charred skeleton, authorities uncovered a scene of unspeakable horror. The bodies of all 5 Addington children lay in the cellar, organized in an exact geometric formation around a stone altar. Subsequent forensic analysis would confirm the children had not perished in the fire, but had been methodically sacrificed in what seemed an elaborate ritual. Edward Addington was arrested and committed to Bedlam Asylum, where he passed his remaining days in seemingly catatonic silence. However, asylum documents note he would sporadically become animated during specific astronomical alignments, endeavoring to sketch complex symbols with any available materials, frequently his own blood. The Addington affair might have receded into obscurity, dismissed as the isolated depravity of a single individual, were it not for subsequent events. Despite the horrific incidents and the manor's near-total destruction, a distant cousin of Edward's, James Addington, laid claim to the property in 1850 and initiated its reconstruction per the original blueprints. James was an esteemed scholar with no known history of mental instability or cruelty. His choice to resurrect Addington Manor baffled many, but he allayed concerns with logical arguments regarding family heritage and the structure's residual quality. Within 2 years, the manor was resurrected, a precise duplicate of its predecessor. This is the part of the story that historians have struggled to explain for over a century. Why would anyone, knowing the full history, choose to rebuild? The answer is more terrifying than mere madness. They weren't just rebuilding a house, they were reactivating a machine. History, as the saying goes, possesses a tendency to repeat. Within months of settling in with his wife and 3 children, James began displaying the same obsessive tendencies that had marked Edward's decline. His wife, Rebecca, recorded increasingly alarming alterations in her husband's demeanor and bizarre events within the reconstructed manor. James remained 3 full days and nights in the East Wing without emerging for sustenance. She wrote to her sister in 1853. When he finally appeared, he looked somehow rejuvenated, more vigorous. Still, something was amiss with his eyes. They seemed to reflect light peculiarly, akin to a cat's eyes in the dark. When I voiced worry over his absence, he smiled in a manner that turned my blood to ice and stated, "I was never absent, my dear. I have been here perpetually, watching you sleep." The template established by Edward Addington replicated itself with alarming exactitude through James and the subsequent Addington generations inhabiting the manor. On every occasion, the family patriarch would unearth something in the East Wing that transformed him. Each time, relatives would disappear or die under mysterious conditions. And invariably, locals would testify to strange illuminations and noises emanating from the estate on dates aligning with ancient pagan festivals. Parish records from the adjacent village of Thornfield chronicle a disquieting trend. During epochs when the Addington family occupied the manor, local child disappearances surged dramatically. Between 1850 and 1870, 23 children evaporated without a trace within a 10-mile radius of Addington Manor. Local officials investigated but could never assemble sufficient proof to implicate the progressively reclusive Addington family. By the century's turn, Addington Manor had been reconstructed thrice following enigmatic fires, and 4 Addington generations had met violent demises within its walls. Nevertheless, distant kin would materialize to claim the estate, compelled by some inexplicable urge to restore the manor and perpetuate its dark purpose. In 1901, the property transferred to Richard Addington, a prosperous London physician with a young family and no prior link to his ancestry's darker facets. He undertook the reconstruction with scientific skepticism, resolved to debunk the superstitious folklore enveloping his family name. The so-called Addington curse is merely a convergence of unlucky events, potentially aggravated by environmental factors like carbon monoxide from defective heating systems, which could account for the documented hallucinations and erratic conduct, he wrote to a colleague. "I plan to document everything systematically and finally lay these absurd rumors to rest." Richard installed electric lighting throughout the manor, a contemporary innovation, and enlisted a scientific team to assess the building's air quality, water supply, and structural soundness. His logical methodology showed initial promise, but within half a year, his correspondence assumed a darker tone. Something resides here, he scribbled in increasingly agitated script. Something that contradicts scientific explanation. I have witnessed it traversing the walls by night. I have heard it whispering in languages dead for millennia. The children perceive it as well. They have commenced drawing its likeness. Elizabeth, his wife, claims I am overworking, that my mind deceives me. But how can we all share the identical delusion? His ultimate letter, dated November 12, 1902, holds a disturbing disclosure. The East Wing. Forever the East Wing. I have ascertained the reason. The original foundations persist intact beneath the modern construction. Edward was not the inaugural. The Blackwoods preceded him and God knows how many others before them. They all located it. The chamber under the East Wing. It predates the manor considerably. It may be older than England itself. The wall symbols correspond with nothing in the archaeological archives. Yet I recognize them somehow. They communicate with something primitive in my brain. Something that predated humanity's crawl from the primordial ooze. God save me. I comprehend now what must be performed. What has eternally been performed. 3 days later, Richard's wife and children were found deceased in their beds, their faces petrified in masks of absolute terror. Richard himself was located in the cellar beneath the East Wing, his body twisted into an impossible posture, encircled by arcane symbols sketched in blood and ash amalgamation. The official death certificate cited heart failure, but the responding officers would later necessitate extensive psychiatric care for their experiences at the scene. Addington Manor was deserted after the 1902 tragedy. The estate decayed into ruin, becoming a pilgrimage site for thrill-seekers, occult practitioners, and the morbidly fascinated. Local authorities eventually condemned the structure as unsafe and barricaded the grounds, but trespassers persistently infiltrated. Many never re-emerged. In 1923, a Cambridge academic group specializing in anthropology and ancient religions secured legal property access for scholarly research. Headed by Professor Walter Hartley, they aimed to catalogue the unusual cellar symbols and contrast them with established occult traditions. Solely one expedition member, a graduate student named Thomas Piper, survived. His testimony was so fantastic that he was initially institutionalized. His journals, however, furnish the most exhaustive record of what may have transpired at Addington Manor across generations. The cellar symbols are not stationary, Piper wrote. They reconfigure when unobserved, assembling into new arrangements. Professor Hartley theorized they embody a variety of non-Euclidean mathematics, equations engineered to resolve dimensional transit problems. Simply put, the entire manor constitutes a machine, a portal to another realm. Piper's narrative implies the Addington family had functioned as this portal's custodians for generations, willingly or otherwise. Each patriarch would learn the truth and be consumed by it, compelled to preserve the dimensional gateway's integrity via ever more horrific offerings. What exists beyond the portal defies human description, Piper continued. Hartley unsealed it. God preserve us all. He truly unsealed it. I caught merely a glimpse while fleeing, yet that glimpse sufficed to shatter my reality's foundation. The others proved less fortunate. Their shrieks still resonate in my dreams, but they expressed not agony. It was rapture. Thomas Piper dedicated his remaining years to self-imposed seclusion, producing intricate paintings striving to capture his experience. The handful of surviving artworks reside in a secured facility at Miskatonic University in Massachusetts, viewable only by special permit due to their documented psychological impact on observers. After the Cambridge episode, the British government discreetly procured the Addington property. Official records list it as a World War II military storage depot, but declassified 1990s documents unveil an alternate narrative. From 1939 to 1945, a specialized British intelligence unit called the Extraordinary Threats Division, ETD, operated from the manor, investigating the reported phenomena for potential wartime application. Colonel James Blackwood, a name provoking disturbing queries about his possible relation to the property's original proprietors, commanded ETD activities at Addington Manor. His official accounts describe anomalous energies and localized reality distortions focused on the East Wing. Whatever dwells beneath Addington Manor transcends conventional understanding, Blackwood composed in a top-secret June 1943 memorandum. It seems responsive to human intent and emotion, particularly fear and desire. The cellar's symbolic configurations operate as a programming language, permitting limited phenomenon control, but at grave risk to the operator's psychological stability. The ETD executed numerous site experiments, most concluding catastrophically. Test subjects exposed to prolonged cellar contact exhibited swift personality decay, culminating in either catatonia or extreme aggression. Multiple researchers recounted encountering doppelgangers of themselves or long-dead relatives in the East Wing corridors. Most disquieting were the temporal irregularities. Manor clocks operated at varying speeds relative to their cellar proximity. One documented case involved a researcher entering the East Wing for a perceived 20 minutes but exiting 3 days later, oblivious to the discrepancy. His journal contained over 200 pages of text he had no recollection of writing, predominantly the same phrase reiterated in progressively deformed handwriting, * they are watching from behind the walls. *. By 1944, ETD personnel casualties had become unacceptable. Colonel Blackwood ordered the cellar sealed with reinforced concrete and withdrew from the property. His final report advocated Addington Manor's total demolition, land salting, and its eradication from all official registries. "What we have confined here remains undefeated," he wrote. "It is only incarcerated, and incarceration is not a permanent solution. There will perpetually be individuals attracted to this place, those who heed the whispers offering power and knowledge exceeding human grasp. God assist us if they triumph where we faltered." The British government disregarded Blackwood's counsel. Instead, they sustained a minor monitoring station nearby, manned by rotating personnel informed they were tracking meteorological patterns. Surveillance persisted quietly for decades, with intermittent reports of anomalous activity, illuminations where none should exist, temperature variances, and unexplained electronic failures. 1976 budget cuts terminated even this minimal oversight. Addington Manor was abandoned to decay, encircled by wild grounds and guarded solely by trespassing warnings and regional superstition. For almost 20 years, it lay undisturbed, a malignant memory gradually fading from communal awareness. Then, in 1995, American tech magnate Victor Reynolds bought the property for a token sum, per land records. Reynolds had amassed wealth through early internet technologies and possessed a well-recorded paranormal interest. His professed goal was renovating the historic manor into a private research institution devoted to probing conventional science's frontiers. Reynolds withheld from public disclosure his affiliation with an obscure occult society called the Morphic Resonance Society. Established in the 1920s, the society contended that specific locations act as consciousness focal points, sites where the boundary between thought and reality grows permeable. Addington Manor figured prominently in their literature as a hypothetical alpha site, Europe's most potent such location. Reynolds occupied the partially restored manor in spring 1996, accompanied by a multidisciplinary research team, all Morphic Resonance Society affiliates. They transported cutting-edge technology, primitive brain-computer interfaces, quantum field detectors, and prototype reality cartography systems. What the Addingtons encountered via occult rites, we shall master technologically, Reynolds declared in the project manifesto. The gateway under Addington Manor is not supernatural. It is a natural phenomenon pre-scientific humans interpreted mystically. Employing proper tools and methodologies, we can eliminate the superstition and harness potentially humanity's most momentous scientific discovery. For 6 months, research advanced methodically. Reynolds circulated regular private server updates for society members, chronicling quantifiable phenomena defying standard explanation, localized gravitational aberrations, spontaneous thermal shifts, and, most curiously, what he termed information bleed, data materializing on their computers without user input. The entity or entities beyond the gateway seem to attempt communication, Reynolds reported in August 1996. The information manifests as intricate mathematical formulae and fragmented multilingual text, including several languages our linguists cannot place. Most provocative is the recurrent phrase, approximately translating to "the door swings both ways." In September 1996, Reynolds' team achieved a breakthrough. Ground-penetrating radar revealed the ETD's 1944 concrete seal had cracked, creating a minor chamber opening. Environmental samples contained unidentifiable trace particles with inexplicable properties. "The particles demonstrate macroscopic quantum superposition," observed Dr. Eleanor Chen, the team physicist. "They coexist in multiple states and seem reactive to conscious observation. Simply stated, they materialize as we anticipate. This indicates that whatever exists beyond the gateway inhabits a reality where thought directly manipulates matter." Reynolds decided to enlarge the opening and deploy sensor and camera-equipped remote drones. The retrieved footage bore disturbing implications. The chamber beyond the seal had vastly exceeded its original dimensions, now manifesting as an enormous cathedral-esque space with non-Euclidean geometry, impossible angles, perspective-dependent distances. The walls bore the same mutable symbols Thomas Piper described decades prior, but now they shifted with deliberate purpose, reacting to the drone's presence. Most unnerving were the peripheral movement suggestions, shapes resembling humans yet distorted, as if seen through undulating water. "We are as much observed as observing," Reynolds noted. "The entities learn from us, adapting to our perceptual techniques. Each intrusion furnishes them additional intelligence about our reality. We must entertain the possibility that our research serves their objectives instead of ours." Despite these apprehensions, Reynolds advanced. In October 1996, he proposed a controlled communion employing brain-computer interfaces to let a human mind directly experience the gateway reality while physically remaining in our world. After extensive deliberation, Dr. Marcus Wayland, the team neurologist, volunteered. The experiment occurred on October 31, 1996, Samhain on the Celtic calendar, a date historical sources indicated thinned the boundary between worlds at Addington Manor. Wayland was linked to monitoring apparatus in a specially prepared East Wing room directly above the chamber. Subsequent events are preserved in the emergency recording auto-activated during the Manor's system failure. The audio captures Wayland's initial perceptions as his consciousness expanded into the gateway reality. "It is magnificent," he murmured. "Geometry unfeasible in our dimension. Hitherto unseen colors that should not exist. Entities are present, observing me. They exhibit curiosity. They are, oh, God. They acknowledge me. How is this feasible? They address me by name, but not my current name. They call me Addington." At that juncture, Wayland commenced convulsing. His vitals skyrocketed, and the brain-computer interface registered activity in typically dormant cerebral regions. As Reynolds and the medical team scrambled to disconnect him, Wayland began speaking in concurrent multitudes of voices, male, female, aged, youthful, all issuing from his throat in a terrifying chorus. "We have eternally been here," the voices proclaimed. "Antecedent to your species' ocean emergence, antecedent to your world's cosmic fire cooling. We have awaited, and you have served. Generation upon generation, you have unsealed the path. Addington, Blackwood, Reynolds. Names alter, but blood recollects. The door swings both ways, and now we reciprocate. We enter." The recording terminates with screams and detonation sounds. Emergency services answering Manor fire reports encountered carnage. The East Wing was annihilated by an apparently cellar-originated blast. Reynolds and his team's bodies were scattered throughout the property, each displaying injuries inconsistent with recognized trauma forms. Most horrifying was Dr. Wayland's bodily state. It was discovered intact but vacant. Subsequent medical examination would report every internal organ excised with surgical exactitude, yet no incisions or apertures marred his skin. The official report attributed the injuries to an unknown explosive device possessing unusual pressure wave characteristics, but first responders comprehended their observations. The Addington property was again abandoned, now under strengthened government response. The entire zone was classified restricted under a chemical contamination pretext. Armed patrols secured the perimeter, and satellite surveillance tracked unusual activity. ***Most of the official files from this incident remain sealed until 2050. But what we've managed to uncover suggests that what happened to Dr. Wayland wasn't an isolated event. It was a demonstration, a proof of concept for a process that is now occurring spontaneously. For nearly 2 decades, the site stayed quiet. Then, in 2014, a sequence of geological disturbances commenced nearby, minor seismic events mismatched with regional profiles. Groundwater adjacent to the property revealed unidentifiable compound traces, and locals recounted electronic malfunctions within a 5-mile radius of the former manor. In 2015, a specialized containment team was deployed to re-examine the site. Their findings remain undisclosed, but satellite imagery depicts a massive concrete structure erected over the prior east wing location. Power usage logs indicate substantial electricity consumption there, consistent with high-capacity containment mechanisms. Leaked 2018 classified documents intimate that Addington Manor's imprisoned entity may no longer be fully confined. Missing time accounts, bizarre dreams, and impossible architectural geometries in neighboring buildings have multiplied exponentially. Most concerning are children born locally since 2016. Hospital staff have recorded unusual birthmarks on many patterns strikingly similar to the Addington cellar symbols. The latest development emerged last year, when routine regional DNA analysis uncovered a startling trend. Genetic markers linked to the historical Addington family have materialized in over 60% of children born within 20 miles of the manor since 2017, irrespective of parental lineage. What portends this for the future? The pattern demonstrated throughout Addington history suggests a cycle now entering a novel phase. Each Addington generation located the gateway, endeavored to command it, and ultimately succumbed to its transcendent nature. Now, if the genetic data proves accurate, we may be observing the largest Addington cohort ever, all magnetized to the identical locus by incomprehensible forces. Government monitoring stations have identified escalating electromagnetic field fluctuations around the containment edifice. Night vision surveillance captures brief intervals where the concrete itself seems to turn translucent, offering glimpses of immense motion beneath. Most disquieting are the locals' uniform dreams, identical visions of a reconstructed manor, more magnificent than before, featuring doors opening onto impossible vistas and a vocal whisper, "Come home." The Addington Chronicle transcends a mere account of familial madness and depravity. It constitutes a warning regarding doors best left sealed and knowledge humanity was never meant to acquire. The gateway beneath Addington Manor has consumed generations of stewards, each convinced they could dominate their discovery, each ultimately functioning as mere conduits for transhuman forces. Concluding this somber hidden history chapter, we must pose a disquieting query. If the pattern persists, what occurs when not one family, but a whole community of genetic Addingtons attains maturity? What ritual might they enact, wittingly or unwittingly? And what could ultimately emerge from behind the veil that has graciously segregated our reality from what anticipates beyond? The most terrifying part of this story isn't what happened in the past. It's the evidence that the final phase of this ancient design is already underway, and it may be too late to stop what the Addingtons started. For those contemplating a regional visit, we must stress the former Addington property's strict public prohibition. The official chemical contamination rationale warrants respect. Perimeter violators have consistently been detained by security forces, at minimum, those who returned. For surrounding community residents, especially those with post-2016 children, medical authorities advise routine psychological assessments and prompt reporting of any unusual dreams or compulsions, particularly those involving geometric designs or whispered directives. The Addington narrative stands as an icy reminder that certain mysteries should remain unsolved, certain portals stay unopened. Behind Addington Manor's grand exterior, behind conventional reality's curtains, something else has perpetually existed, patient, ancient, and ravenous. And if historical patterns indicate anything, it now looms closer to emergence than ever before. Sleep soundly, and recollect, should you dream of a moorland manor with an inviting east wing, do not cross its threshold. Some invitations, once accepted, become irrevocable. This was the secret of fear. Until our next encounter, maintain illumination and avoid prolonged scrutiny of history's darkened recesses. What gazes back might acknowledge you. If grand manor visions on misty moors trouble your sleep or whispers emanate from behind your walls, remember this: the Addingtons were not the initial casualties of transhuman forces. Nor shall they be the ultimate. Presently, in global dwellings and structures, reality's boundaries attenuate at specific points. The hungry ones perpetually observe, eternally anticipating someone sufficiently inquisitive or desperate to extend invitation. We appreciate your company during this macabre exploration. If this existential horror narrative engaged you, please consider supporting The Secret of Fear by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing with aficionados of history's darker aspects. Your patronage enables our continued excavation of these forgotten tales that perhaps, in certain instances, were purposefully interred. Until our subsequent shadow voyage, I wish you tranquil repose, if such a state remains attainable after tonight's revelations.